The glass doors of Seagal Studios slid open with a soft chime, letting in the afternoon sunlight and a tall, broad-shouldered man in a long black leather jacket. His hair was tied back neatly. His trademark tinted sunglasses concealed the calm but watchful eyes of a man who'd spent decades in front of cameras. Steven Seagal hadn't set foot in the company's headquarters in over 3 years, until today. He stepped inside with the slow, deliberate stride that had once dominated Hollywood red carpets. The lobby had changed. The bold movie posters he'd helped create were gone, replaced by minimalist art and a giant digital logo he barely recognized. Steven offered a polite nod to the young woman behind the reception desk. "Good afternoon," he said in his measured, gravel-low voice. "I'm here to see the production floor." The receptionist didn't even glance up at first, still typing. "Do you have an appointment, sir?" she asked. "Not exactly," he replied with a faint smile. "I don't need one. I'm Steven Seagal." That made her look up, frowning slightly as if searching her memory. "I'm sorry. And you're here for?" "I started this company," he said, resting a palm lightly on the counter. "I'd just like to take a look around." Her expression tightened. "I'm going to need to see some ID. Visitors aren't allowed past the lobby without clearance." Steven raised an eyebrow, amused at first. He slipped out his wallet and showed his license. But her tone stayed firm. "You're not on today's guest list. I'll have to call security." The chuckle that escaped his throat was more disbelief than humor. "I think there's been a mistake," he said evenly. "You don't need to call anyone. This," he gestured at the towering glass and steel atrium, "is my place." She shook her head. "I'm sorry, sir. Rules are rules." 2 uniformed security guards approached from the hallway, puzzled but already wary. "Is there a problem here?" one asked. Before Steven could answer, the receptionist lowered her voice. "This gentleman says he owns the place, but he's not cleared to enter." The lobby fell silent for a heartbeat. A couple of employees near the elevators turned to stare, whispering to each other. The 2 security guards stepped closer, their black boots clicking sharply on the polished marble floor. One of them, a tall, stocky man with a buzz cut, folded his arms. "Sir," he said with professional firmness, "we're going to need you to step aside while we sort this out." Steven Seagal didn't move. His posture was relaxed but carried a quiet authority. "There's nothing to sort out," he replied calmly. "This company exists because of me. I built it from scratch." The younger guard, clearly new to the job, shot his partner a skeptical glance. "You mean the Steven Seagal?" "The movie guy." Steven's lips twitched in the barest hint of a smile. "The very same. But I'm not here as a celebrity. I'm here as the founder." The receptionist, now visibly flustered, held up a hand. "Look, I'm just following protocol. We have strict rules, no exceptions, even for, famous people." Steven leaned slightly closer to the desk, lowering his voice to something almost conversational but carrying an unmistakable edge. "Rules are important," he said, "but so is remembering whose name is on the foundation stone outside." A murmur rippled through the lobby as a couple of employees near the coffee station began to whisper. "Is that really him?" one asked. "I think it is. He looks older, but that's Seagal," the other replied. The tall guard cleared his throat, trying to sound authoritative. "Sir, we still need to verify your story. If you'd please wait over there." He gestured toward a sitting area by the window. Steven's eyes shifted toward the chairs, but he stayed rooted where he was. "I'm not a visitor in my own house," he said, his tone firm but never raised. For the first time, the younger guard looked unsure, as if something about Steven's composure unsettled him. The receptionist grabbed the phone, dialing an internal line. "I'll call a floor supervisor. Maybe they can confirm." Steven glanced around the lobby, noting the new artwork and the glossy corporate banners replacing his old movie posters. He spoke quietly, almost to himself. "Everything looks different. Except the spirit. That's still mine." A man in a gray suit exited the elevator just then, slowing when he noticed the unusual scene. He paused, staring at Steven with a flicker of recognition before heading toward the exit. Steven caught the man's eye and offered a polite nod. The man hesitated but kept walking, clearly choosing not to get involved. The buzz-cut guard cleared his throat again, trying to maintain control. "Look, sir, we just need some form of clearance. We've had incidents before with people pretending to be someone they're not." Steven's jaw tightened slightly, but his voice remained low and steady. "You think I'd pretend to be me? You've seen the posters on these walls, haven't you? At least the ones they didn't take down." The younger guard shifted uncomfortably. "I mean, you do look like him," he muttered under his breath. The receptionist hushed him with a sharp glance, then said into the phone, "Yes, there's a man here claiming to be Mr. Seagal. Could you come down to the lobby?" "Okay, I'll tell him." She hung up and looked at Steven, her tone still businesslike but slightly softer. "Someone from management is on their way. Please just wait here, sir." Steven finally moved toward the window-side chairs but didn't sit. He stood with his arms crossed loosely, watching the city skyline beyond the glass. A few more employees entered the lobby, their conversations faltering as they noticed him. Someone whispered, "That's definitely Steven Seagal. I watched his movies growing up." The receptionist's eyes darted around nervously, aware that the crowd's curiosity was growing. Steven broke the silence with a low remark, aimed at no one in particular. "You spend years building something, and suddenly you're treated like a stranger. That's the world we live in." The words struck the younger guard, who shifted awkwardly on his feet. Moments later, a supervisor in a tailored Navy suit appeared from the hallway holding a tablet. He scanned the scene with an air of authority. "What's the issue here?" he asked the receptionist. She gestured toward Steven. "This gentleman insists he's Mr. Steven Seagal, the founder, but he's not on the visitor list." The supervisor turned to Steven with a polite but skeptical smile. "Mr. Seagal, is it? May I see some identification?" Steven pulled out his wallet again and offered his ID. The supervisor checked it, then frowned slightly. "Yes, that's you," the supervisor said slowly. "But that still doesn't explain why you're here without clearance. These offices are under new management now." A hush fell over the lobby as the words sank in. Steven's voice remained calm but carried a sharper edge now. "New management or not, this company was built on my sweat and my vision. I don't need clearance to walk through its doors." The younger guard's eyes darted between them, sensing that things were about to get tense. The air inside the lobby felt heavy, as if everyone was holding their breath. Steven stood by the tall glass window, arms loosely crossed over his chest, his reflection staring back at him against the skyline of Los Angeles. He had walked into a building that once felt like home. Now it felt like hostile territory. The Navy-suited supervisor, still clutching his tablet, took a cautious step closer. "Mr. Seagal," he said in a tone that was polite but strained, "this is no longer a public space for you. The board has changed, the policies have changed, and you are required to have authorization like any other guest." Steven tilted his head slightly, his voice dropping to that gravel-low rumble that had intimidated more than a few Hollywood producers back in the day. "I didn't spend decades turning this into a household name so I could be treated like an intruder," he said. "You're standing in the lobby of the studio that my blood, sweat, and sleepless nights built." The supervisor's polite smile faltered, but he didn't step back. "That may be true, sir, but procedures exist for a reason. If you'll allow us to escort you to the waiting area, we can—" Steven raised one hand in a small, deliberate gesture that somehow silenced the rest of the supervisor's sentence. "Don't mistake calm for weakness," he said softly. "I'm not here to cause trouble. I'm here to remember what I built." By now, the small crowd in the lobby had grown. Several employees leaned discreetly on the railing of the mezzanine floor above, whispering to one another. "That really is him," someone murmured. "I thought he moved overseas years ago," another replied. Near the reception desk, the younger security guard shifted uneasily. He finally spoke up. "Sir, why now? Why come back after all this time?" Steven's gaze softened for a moment. "Because I heard the place had changed. I wanted to see it for myself. I wanted to walk through these halls again." He looked around the lobby, taking in the new decor, the steel and glass minimalism replacing the warm wood panels he had chosen years ago. There was a quiet sadness in his eyes, as if every missing poster on the wall carried a memory that only he could feel. The supervisor sighed, adjusting his tie. "Mr. Seagal, I understand you have a personal connection, but the company has restructured. The board doesn't see you as part of daily operations anymore. Without a scheduled meeting, we can't let you pass the lobby." Steven's jaw tightened. He stepped closer, his tall frame casting a long shadow across the marble floor. "I'm not asking to sit in the boardroom. I'm asking to walk down a hallway I helped pay for brick by brick. You think that needs a meeting request?" A ripple of low gasps came from the onlookers. The younger guard's partner subtly shifted his stance, preparing in case things got heated, but Steven's voice never rose. It was calm, controlled, but undeniably powerful. For a few tense seconds, no one moved. You could hear the faint hum of the air conditioning and the muted traffic outside. Everything else was frozen. The receptionist whispered to the supervisor, "Maybe we should just let him through." The supervisor cut her off quietly but firmly. "Not without clearance. I'll lose my job." Steven heard that, and something in his expression changed. Less anger now, more disappointment. "I see," he said. "The building remembers me. The walls remember. But the people inside, they don't." His words struck the younger guard, who lowered his eyes to the floor. A phone buzzed on the supervisor's tablet, an incoming message from upstairs. He glanced at it, frowned, then looked back at Steven. "Sir," he said carefully. "Someone from the executive floor is coming down. Please wait here until they arrive." Steven gave a slow nod and stepped back a half pace, but his presence still filled the space. He clasped his hands behind his back, standing silently like a sentry from another era. Above them, employees continued to whisper, the tension spreading through the building like static electricity. "Imagine building a company and being treated like a stranger," a woman on the mezzanine murmured to her colleague. The younger guard cleared his throat again. "Mr. Seagal, I didn't mean any disrespect. I didn't know the history." Steven looked at him and for the first time allowed a faint half smile. "Respect isn't about knowing history," he replied. "It's about how you treat people standing in front of you." The guard nodded, visibly chastened. At that moment, the elevator bell chimed, an unmistakable sharp ding that echoed across the lobby. Heads turned as the door slid open to reveal a sharply dressed woman in her 50s, carrying a leather folder, someone clearly higher up in the hierarchy. The elevator doors slid open with a soft, mechanical sigh. From inside stepped a woman with sharp, confident strides, mid-50s, silver-streaked hair tied neatly in a low bun. She wore a navy skirt suit and carried a slim leather folder tucked beneath her arm. Every step echoed in the marble lobby, drawing the attention of every whispering employee. Steven turned toward her, his expression unreadable behind his dark glasses. The security guards instinctively stepped back as if they sensed the temperature in the room had shifted. The woman stopped just a few feet away, assessing him calmly. "Mr. Seagal," she said at last, her tone crisp but not unkind. "I'm Elaine Foster, the current chief operating officer." Steven inclined his head slightly. "Miss Foster," he said in his steady, gravel-low voice. "We haven't met before. I hear you're running my house now." Elaine's lips curved into a faint professional smile. "This is the company's house, Mr. Seagal. And yes, I oversee daily operations." "I understand there's been some confusion at the front desk." The receptionist straightened in her seat. Looking both relieved and nervous, Steven gestured around the lobby, his large hand sweeping past the glass walls and the polished floors. "Confusion," he repeated, almost to himself. "Seems to be the word of the day. I come home after years away and find I'm treated like a stranger." Elaine's eyes softened slightly, but her tone remained formal. "I'm sorry you feel that way. Things have changed here since you stepped down. We have strict security protocols." He stepped closer, his presence towering, but his voice never rising above that slow, deliberate rumble. "Protocols, I understand," he said. "What I don't understand is forgetting the people who built the foundation you're standing on." Somewhere above them, a chair squeaked as a mezzanine employee leaned over the railing to listen. Elaine shifted her folder under her arm. "Mr. Seagal, no one here denies what you did for this company. But the truth is, it's not the same place you left behind. We've restructured, rebranded, even shifted our market. Not everyone on staff knows the history." Steven tilted his head slightly, studying her as if weighing her words. "So I hear." The walls changed color. The posters came down. The vision shifted. "But the spirit of what we built? That's supposed to live on in the people who inherit it." Elaine drew a slow breath, then said more quietly, "I can't speak for everyone, but I remember your films, your long nights on set. I was just an assistant at the time, running scripts back and forth. I watched you sign the paperwork that kept this studio alive during its roughest year." The tension in Steven's shoulders eased a fraction at the memory. "You were there," he said. "Then you understand why I came back. Not to interfere, not to claim a throne, but to walk the halls I helped raise. I wanted to see what became of it." Behind them, one of the guards murmured almost under his breath, Man's just trying to see the place he built. Elaine caught the murmur but stayed focused. I understand that, but the board is very protective of the new brand. They've asked us to limit outside influence, even from former founders. It's not personal, it's business. Steven gave a low, humorless chuckle. Business, he echoed. That's the word that replaces loyalty in most boardrooms. A ripple of uncomfortable silence spread across the lobby. Then from the mezzanine above, a voice called out hesitantly, Mr. Seagal? I worked on Shadow's Edge back in the early days. You probably don't remember me. A thin man in his late 40s stepped into view, leaning over the railing. Steven looked up and surprisingly his expression softened with recognition. Tommy Wright, he said. You were the camera tech who stayed late to fix a jammed reel. I remember. Tommy grinned in disbelief. You remember that? That was over 20 years ago. The crowd in the lobby and above began to murmur, impressed that Steven remembered a small act from decades past. Elaine glanced upward at the employee, then back at Steven. You've certainly made an impression on the people who were here back then, she admitted. Steven's voice lowered. I didn't build a company. I built a family. Or at least I thought I did. For a moment there was no reply. Even the receptionist looked a little moved. Elaine finally cleared her throat. I can allow you a brief walk through the main hall, off the record. But I'll have to clear anything further with the board. That's the best I can do right now. Steven nodded slowly. That's all I wanted. A walk through the memories. The supervisor and guards exchanged uncertain glances. The atmosphere had shifted, no longer hostile but heavy with unspoken stories. The hush in the lobby felt almost fragile, as if one sharp word could shatter it. Steven stood motionless near the glass doors, his hands clasped loosely behind his back. Elaine, the COO, was about to guide him down the hallway for the promised walk when the elevator chimed again. This time, a tall man in a charcoal gray suit emerged. His stride was brisk, his jaw tight, his expression carrying the kind of authority that made employees automatically straighten their posture. Elaine's composure wavered just enough to reveal tension. Mr. Carter, she greeted carefully. We weren't expecting you to come down. Carter, the new senior manager representing the board, barely nodded at her before fixing his gaze on Steven. So it's true, he said. You showed up. Steven's brow arched slightly. Showed up, he echoed in that low voice that somehow filled the space. You say it like I crashed a stranger's wedding. This is the house I built. Carter's tone was clipped. Let's get one thing straight. The company has moved forward. You no longer have operational control or stake. You cannot simply walk in here unannounced. A ripple went through the crowd of employees still gathered along the mezzanine and the lobby edges. They sensed the coming clash. Old guard versus new. Steven took one slow step toward Carter, his boots making a soft but deliberate sound on the marble floor. I didn't come here to take back control, he said. I came to see the place that still carries my name even if you've painted over the walls. Carter's eyes narrowed. That's the problem. This isn't about nostalgia. We have rebranded, rebuilt, and we have rules. Security protocols exist for a reason. You're setting a bad example barging in like this. Steven tilted his head slightly as though weighing the words. Rules protect a company. Respect protects its soul. Seems you've kept one and lost the other. The crowd murmured softly at the line. Carter's jaw clenched. Respect goes both ways. You left this place years ago. You chose to step away. Steven's reply was calm but edged with steel. I stepped back so the next generation could lead. I didn't step away so you could erase the blood and sweat of the people who built it. Elaine shifted her stance, sensing the growing friction. Gentlemen, she said gently. This doesn't need to be a confrontation to be. But Carter cut her off. No. This is exactly the conversation we need. Mr. Seagal needs to understand that this company is no longer his stage. For the first time that afternoon, Steven's posture stiffened. He took off his sunglasses slowly, revealing eyes that had lost none of their intensity despite the years. His voice dropped an octave lower, the kind of voice that once silenced a movie set. Stage, he said quietly. I fought for every inch of this floor. I signed every check when this company couldn't afford the lights. I called in favors, worked double shifts, and held this place together when everyone else was ready to walk away. If you think this was just a stage for me, you've never built anything worth bleeding for. The words landed heavy. The employees above leaned forward, stunned into silence. Carter's face flushed, but he kept his tone controlled. Those days are over. We have investors, policies, a new direction. You don't get to stroll in and question how we do things now. Steven stepped closer until they were nearly face to face, his height and presence casting a long shadow over Carter. I'm not questioning your business model, Steven said. I'm questioning your humanity. Somewhere between the spreadsheets and new logos, you forgot what this company was born from. Loyalty, grit, and respect for every pair of hands that built it. The younger security guard, who had been silent until now, shifted his weight and muttered, "He's got a point." Carter's glare swept to the guard, shutting him up instantly. Steven, sensing the moment, lowered his voice again. Not a threat, but a statement carved in stone. A man who forgets his roots has already lost his balance. I don't want your boardroom. I just wanted to walk these halls to remember. That's all. But if I have to ask permission to walk the ground I paid for, then maybe you've already lost more than you realize. Elaine's eyes glistened slightly, but she said nothing. For a long moment, no one moved. The silence in the lobby felt electric, a tension between two eras clashing in one room. Then a slow clap came from the mezzanine. Everyone turned to see Tommy Wright, the longtime employee Steven had recognized earlier. Tommy's voice carried through the lobby. He's right. We wouldn't even have jobs if he hadn't kept this place alive back then. A little respect isn't too much to ask. The clap spread. Another employee joined in, then a third. The applause built slowly, not loud or wild, but steady. A subtle rebellion against the coldness of the new management. Carter's face hardened as the sound grew. He looked at Steven, who simply stood there, composed, letting the moment speak for itself. The sound of slow, steady applause rolled across the lobby like distant thunder. Carter stood frozen, jaw tight, his authority wavering under the weight of his own employees' loyalty to the man he was trying to dismiss. Steven didn't raise a hand to quiet them. He simply stood still, eyes steady, letting the applause echo against the glass walls. For the first time that day, the space felt less like a corporate lobby and more like a courtroom. The crowd silently choosing a side. Just as Carter opened his mouth to speak, the main elevator chimed again. Everyone turned. From inside stepped an older man with a silver tie pin shaped like a pair of boxing gloves. He carried a tablet under his arm and walked with a slight limp, the kind that came from years of work on factory floors before suits ever entered the picture. Elaine's eyes lit up with surprise. "Mr. Vargas," she breathed. Vargas, the company's original chief accountant, one of the last living members of the founding team. Though he had retired years ago, everyone in the building knew his reputation for blunt honesty. "Why is it so quiet in here?" Vargas asked, glancing around at the crowd. His eyes landed on Steven, then on Carter. "What's going on?" Carter stepped forward first. "Just an unexpected visit," he said. "Mr. Seagal came by without clearance. We're sorting it out." Vargas's brows knit together as he looked back at Steven. "Sorting it out? You're talking about the man who kept the lights on when our first investor pulled out." The crowd leaned in, sensing they were about to hear something few had known. Vargas shifted the tablet under his arm, his tone gaining a sharp edge. "Some of you weren't around back then. There was a winter when payroll almost didn't happen. We were weeks from closing the doors. You know who wrote the personal check to keep everyone paid through Christmas? That man right there." A ripple of whispers spread across the room. Younger employees exchanged astonished glances. Steven remained silent, almost uncomfortable with the praise. He had come for memories, not recognition. Carter forced a short laugh. "Ancient history. Times change. One act of charity doesn't give someone lifetime authority." Vargas's voice rose. "Charity? That one act saved over 100 jobs. He didn't just write a check, and he mortgaged his own home. When the bank threatened foreclosure, he still didn't miss payroll. He even went without a salary for 8 months so everyone else could keep theirs." The hush that followed felt deeper than before, charged with revelation. Steven lowered his gaze for a moment. "That was a long time ago," he said softly. "We all did what we had to do." Carter crossed his arms, trying to regain control. "Regardless, the company belongs to the board now. We can't let nostalgia interfere with policy." Vargas shook his head. "Policy is important, but gratitude is just as important. The board might own the stock, but some debts can't be measured in shares." At that moment, Tommy Wright stepped down from the mezzanine, standing beside Steven. His voice was calm but firm. "Mr. Carter, the man isn't here to meddle in operations. He just wanted to walk through the halls he built. What's the harm in letting him do that with dignity?" Several other employees nodded in agreement. Elaine added gently, "Sometimes respect is worth more than protocol." Carter's composure began to crack. "You all think sentiment will run this company? Investors don't pay for nostalgia." Steven finally looked at him squarely, his voice a low rumble. "No one here is asking for nostalgia to run the company. We're asking for it to guide how you treat the people who built it." The words landed like a gavel strike. The younger security guard who had stopped Steven earlier shifted awkwardly, then stepped forward, addressing Steven directly. "Sir, I didn't know all that. I was just following orders. I'm sorry for how I handled things." Steven gave a small nod, no anger in his eyes. "You did your job. No harm done. The world only gets better when we're willing to learn." His calmness drew an approving murmur from the crowd. Carter glanced up at the mezzanine where more employees had gathered, most of them watching him with an expression that was no longer neutral. The shift in the room was unmistakable. Authority was no longer on his side. Trying to save face, Carter straightened his tie. "Fine. If Mr. Seagal wants a tour, he can have one. But we'll keep it brief." Vargas chuckled dryly. "Generous of you," he said, his voice dripping with irony. Steven gave a faint smile and stepped back, refusing to gloat. He simply extended a hand toward Carter. "No grudges. Let's show the new generation where it all started." Carter hesitated, then shook it. Stiffly, but he shook it. Elaine gestured toward the corridor leading to the original production floor. "This way, Mr. Seagal," she said. As they began to walk, employees quietly trailed behind, curious to hear stories of the early days. The cameras on their phones remained at their sides, not out of fear of policy now, but out of respect. Something about the scene felt sacred, the passing of a torch, even if the torch had been hidden for years. From the back of the group, Vargas spoke just loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Funny thing about roots, you can build over them, pave over them, even forget they're there, but they still hold the whole tree up." A few employees exchanged thoughtful glances. As Steven walked past the framed photos of the company's milestones on the wall, he paused at an old black and white picture of a much younger version of himself, standing next to the first machine they had bought. The smile on his face in that photo was unguarded, full of promise. Steven's voice softened. "Feels like a lifetime ago." Elaine smiled faintly. "Without that lifetime, none of this would be standing today." The quiet tour of the production floor lasted less than an hour, but the memory lingered in everyone who witnessed it. Steven moved slowly, pausing at each corner as if the walls themselves held stories only he could hear. He stopped in front of the old assembly line, now upgraded with sleek robotic arms, and touched the metal railing as if greeting an old friend. Elaine noticed the small smile that softened his face. "You always said the machines were like your soldiers," she remarked. Steven chuckled. "They were more loyal than half the people we hired back then," he replied warmly, earning a few laughs from the staff following behind. The mood had shifted entirely. Where there had been tension and suspicion hours earlier, there was now quiet reverence and, unexpectedly, camaraderie. But while Steven was inside reminiscing, the outside world was already buzzing. A short video clip of the confrontation in the lobby, Tommy's slow clap, Vargas's speech, and Steven's calm but cutting remarks had been uploaded to social media by an anonymous employee. By the time Steven and his small entourage returned to the lobby, the post had gone viral. The video was everywhere. Twitter, Instagram Reels, TikTok, even trending on YouTube with the title, "Steven Seagal gets told to leave his own company. His response leaves everyone speechless." In the video, the contrast between Steven's composed demeanor and Carter's rigid corporate defensiveness struck a chord with millions of viewers. The top comment read, "This is why you never forget the people who built the foundation. Legends deserve respect." Another viewer wrote, "The way Seagal handled that, no yelling, no ego, just dignity. That's what leadership looks like." By evening, news outlets were calling it the day a founder returned. Some framed it as a cautionary tale about corporations losing their soul. Others hailed it as an inspiring lesson in humility and respect. At a nearby cafe, Two young interns from the company sat scrolling through their phones in disbelief. "That's us in the background," one whispered. "Look at the comments. People are on his side," the other replied. Meanwhile, Carter sat alone in his office upstairs, staring at his screen as the clip racked up millions of views. For the first time, he looked less like the untouchable executive and more like a man wondering if he'd just been cast as the villain in a story that would follow him for years. Steven, unaware of the online storm, prepared to leave. Before he stepped out, Tommy approached him. "Sir, I just wanted to say thank you for everything you did back then. A lot of us wouldn't be here if it weren't for you." Steven smiled faintly, patting Tommy's shoulder. "Just promise me you'll pass that forward. Keep the heart of this place alive." Outside, dusk settled over the city, the streetlights flickering to life. Steven slipped on his sunglasses, an old habit, even at night, and walked toward his car without a hint of triumph. Just a quiet dignity that made the moment feel cinematic. Within days, the video's reach had surpassed 20 million views. It sparked conversations across the internet about respecting pioneers, the importance of corporate culture, and the danger of forgetting one's roots. Talk shows invited Steven for interviews, but he politely declined most of them. "I didn't come back to make headlines," he told one journalist over the phone. "I just wanted to remember where it all started. If people learn something from it, that's enough." The company board, however, couldn't ignore the wave of public sentiment. A week later, Carter released a formal statement acknowledging Steven's contributions to the company's founding and announcing a new initiative, a commemorative wall dedicated to the original team who built the foundation. At the ceremony for the unveiling of the wall, Carter shook Steven's hand before the cameras and admitted, "We forgot our roots for a moment. This reminded us not to." The applause that followed was louder and warmer than the one in the lobby days earlier. It was no longer just a few employees clapping in quiet rebellion, but the entire company standing in recognition of a man who refused to let history be erased. As the cameras clicked, Steven leaned toward Carter and said softly so only he could hear, "Companies survive on profits. Legacies survive on respect. Make sure you build both." Carter nodded without his usual stiffness, as if he finally understood. The story of that day became more than a viral clip. It turned into a case study in business ethics, played in corporate seminars and university lectures about leadership. Months later, someone painted a mural in the company cafeteria of a younger Steven, standing beside that first machine he'd once guarded like treasure. Beneath it, in bold letters, were Vargas's words, "You can build over the roots, but they're still holding the tree up." For Steven, the visit had started as a quiet trip down memory lane but ended as a reminder to everyone, in business, in life, in leadership, that history deserves to be honored. The final shot for the video's closing montage could be Steven walking out of the building at sunset, the company's glass facade reflecting the sky behind him. The narrator's closing line, "In a world that moves too fast to remember, one man's return reminded everyone of a simple truth. The future stands tallest on the shoulders of those who built the past." If you believe respect should never go out of style, drop A in the comments and subscribe for more stories that celebrate honor, legacy, and humility.